Home surround used to be pretty simple. A few speakers pointed around the room and everything locked to those lanes. Left, right, and whatever sat beside or behind you. The sound could move, but only by hopping from one speaker to the next, like a ball being passed down a line. You heard the motion, but you also heard the handoff. It worked for its time, it just never felt immersive. The first object-based system that actually worked at home ended up being Atmos. There were earlier attempts in theaters and labs, but none of them stuck. What Atmos changed was placement. Instead of locking sounds to speakers, it treats each effect as a point in space. From there, it blends across the speakers that sit closest to those angles. That's when layout starts to matter. If your speakers drift from the angles the mix is built for, the placement drifts with them. Most people skip the setup part, even though it's the thing that keeps everything aligned. The receiver measures your room, builds a speaker map, and figures out what's actually where. And this is what lets something like a helicopter rise behind you and move forward without jumping between speakers. Most home setups stop at 2 height speakers. That's the 0.2 in 5.1.2 or 7.1.2. 2 heights give the front of the room some lift. 4 overheads can smooth out motion from front to back, but whether it's worth it depends on the room. Bigger rooms spread channels naturally. Smaller rooms don't change much because everything sits close together. For the height layer itself, in-ceiling speakers are the straightforward choice. They put sound where the mix wants it. Up-firing modules bounce audio off the ceiling to mimic height, but that trick relies heavily on the room. 8 to 10 feet works well. Past 12, the reflection loses too much energy for the effect to hold. Skip height speakers entirely and the system falls back to the bed layer. You still get the full Atmos mix, only without the vertical movement. Once you move past dedicated speakers, Atmos works differently. TVs and soundbars can decode the track, but most of the time they're faking the height layer with processing. Some soundbars use up-firing drivers, and those can work when the room cooperates. But if the ceiling's too high or shaped oddly, the bounce barely registers. And even in good rooms, the height usually stays toward the front because everything is still coming from the bar. There are 2 home versions of Atmos. Streaming uses Dolby Digital Plus to stay within bandwidth limits. You keep the same object positions, but the finer detail, including some height cues, gets trimmed down. Blu-ray uses Dolby True HD, which isn't limited the same way, so you get more detail in the same layout. DTS:X sits in the same family, but takes a more flexible approach. The whole place speakers anywhere pitch sounds nice, but home receivers still follow preset layouts. It doesn't rebuild the mix for your room, it's simply less strict about the layout you pick. Where it stands out is scaling. While Atmos is designed around specific height requirements, DTS:X is more aggressive about mapping objects to whatever speakers you actually have. Even if your height speakers sit a little too far forward or back, the system's processing is forgiving enough that the vertical movement still holds together. Content is where the two split. Atmos became the default for streaming, so it's practically everywhere. DTS:X mostly lives on Blu-ray and a handful of streaming titles. Disney Plus is the outlier. Their IMAX Enhanced releases use a version of the theatrical IMAX mix instead of the standard streaming track. But the IMAX audio only plays on devices that support that profile, usually TVs running the Disney Plus app directly. When the IMAX mix does play, the difference isn't the codec. Streaming DTS:X is still lighter than full Atmos. What stands out is the mix itself. Disney's regular Atmos tracks are near-field mixes tuned for small speakers. The IMAX version keeps the theatrical bass dynamics, so the low end hits harder. Auro 3D sits outside all of this. It isn't a streaming format, and it doesn't show up on TVs. It's a home theater layout that builds height using fixed layers rather than objects. And rather than moving sounds freely through open space, it creates a vertical stage, one layer at ear height, another directly above it, and a single overhead speaker called the Voice of God. Auro doesn't send effects drifting across the ceiling as much as it assigns them to floors. It's also the most layout-dependent system here. If the height layer isn't placed directly above the ear-level speakers, the whole thing collapses into regular surround because the stack can't hold. Auro 3D still exists on the side, mostly for people who like its music up mixer, but it's niche, and you almost never see native mixes for it. Across all of them, the room is the thing that makes or breaks the result.